Hello, my name's Tina Hyde, and I recently had the pleasure of interviewing Rob Ryan on behalf of Camp for Animals. Rob is a serial entrepreneur and has been in the field of nutraceuticals for the past 20 years. He recently created a product called Gussy's Guts, and my first question to him was how and why he created it.
The inspiration was born out of necessity, but with a background in nutraceuticals. So my professional background and honestly, my personal interests since I was very young, probably, maybe 9 or 10, was about what nutrition, nutrients could do for you in your health, keep you out of trouble, and have you lead a better life, a better quality life. I wasn't really thinking of longevity back then, but obviously as you get older, you do. I was thinking of just basically staying out of the hospital. You know, I had a grandfather with diabetes. I had around that age, I had quite a few of my relatives pass away. So I was always thinking about and I'm just very interested naturally in what would stave off those, hospitalizations, stave off disease. And so I think it was around 16, I got really into nutrition and nutraceuticals. I was getting old enough to play around with my diet. I was looking at, nutraceuticals as opposed to pharmaceuticals. I was looking at, how you could modify your body's behavior and affect its health. And, what I started to learn was nutrition would give you these levers and dials. The levers would be the big effects and the dials would be the small fine tuning, and nutrition would do that for you. So I figured out pretty quickly that was the path that I wanted to take in my own health. So back to more recently, Gus had an issue. He got into the trash. He rarely ever does that. My mom was staying with me, and I was hurried, and I left the trash out. And when I came back, it was all over the kitchen. He'd gotten into it, and I found out later, a week later, that he'd gotten a hold of a bottle cap, plastic, from a carton, swallowed it. And as the story goes, he basically, wasn't eating for 7 days total. The last 3 days, he wasn't drinking. And I was horrified. I had a great healthcare team. I took him to this about 45 minutes away to this really amazing state-of-the-art veterinary clinic that had the best, newest equipment. They couldn't find this bottle cap. So everybody was holding their hands up and going, well, we don't know what's going on. And so I stressed out and found out that, in that 7 days, he finally ended up letting it out his other end, and found out that was the culprit. But it was a really, really serious 7 days. And I learned a couple things from that. One was that he really cashed in on his health. He had a huge savings, if you want to think of it this way, that he was able to cash in, a huge reserve. And he lost a ton of weight during that 7 days. And he was able to stay healthy. I gave him, basically all he was keeping down. He didn't really want to drink. He wasn't very motivated, obviously, but coconut water was also something I gave him. The whole, it was about 5 days, and then he stopped drinking that, which really concerned me because coconut water is, that's his candy. So I give it to him on his fasting days. So today actually is one of his fasting days. We do it once a week, and all he gets is coconut water. That's it. So I learned that he cashed in on his health. That was really a great, lesson for me in a reserve, and, having your dogs healthy for that, you just don't know when something's going to happen, is really important. And then I learned how sensitive the gut was in the whole GI tract. So this was one of those bottle caps that, when it came out, it was bent. He'd obviously bitten it, bent it, and it was jagged, kind of jaggedy because he chewed on it a little bit. So it was sharp. And so that thing had made its way all the way down from his esophagus to his colon. And it probably, for 7 days, it had done a job on his entire GI tract. So after that, I was obviously relieved. He was eating right away after that, playing, everything was great. His stools were horrible. So I took it upon myself. My vet and I, we got him into some probiotics and did some more therapeutic interventions. And I was just thinking, well, what about after that? How can I continue the healing process? Build up those reserves. So I was looking into fermentation, and I realized the ones at the store were loaded with salt, and some of them had sugar, and some of them had onions, and some of them had other things he couldn't have, other ingredients. And so I said, well, I'll just make some myself. And being the frustrated apothecary that I am, I went right. I didn't just get into sauerkraut. I started with a few vegetables that I thought were really nutrient dense. And over the batches that I made them more and more comprehensive and more, I guess, substantial. So
nutrient dense.
Yeah, all nutrient dense. And I really started researching what's in these vegetables, what do they do, how can they affect the body of a dog? And I really started getting into it. And my own batch ended up growing to about 11 ingredients. And then it got once it goes to about 11, once it goes to about 8 ingredients, there's a lot on your counter when you're preparing this, and just food prep is a lot. So I did that for few months. And I honestly started to wonder. I said, well, he's doing so well on this. And there were so many profound changes I'd seen in him. The clarity of his eyes got better. His tongue was really brilliant and beautiful, bright red. His gums got better. Stool was amazing. Over time, got really, really back to its old self. It was pretty bad, mucusy, really radical changes in his stools. And I noticed his coat got even better. So better than it even was before. So I started to really research heavily what was going on with these fermented formulas. And then I reached out to a friend of mine who's been in the pet business for a long time. And she said, wow, this is a great idea. I said I wanted to make it for other dogs. And she brought in this element of freeze drying, and we started to collaborate. And I said, I don't reach out to Ian, Dr. Ian Billinghurst. He and I had met I think at that point it's like 22 years ago. I hired Ian as a consultant for me when I got my first dog. So, this is like, most of my life, I've been an entrepreneur since I was 14. And I think one of my core competencies now that I've developed over time is knowing who to work with and who to hire. And so when I got my first dog, I went right to the best experts I could find. And that was Marty Goldstein and his brother, Bob Goldstein. They were my vet consultants. And I didn't seem to have anybody locally that was a really great holistic vet. So I did phone consults with them and just ordered stuff, through them. And they referred me over to Ian on the diet component. So I did phone consults at great expense to Sydney. Those are back in the days when long distance calls cost a lot. And it was worth every penny. And he and I had struck up a brief friendship through that interaction. And so I reached out to him some 22 years later, and I said, hey, here I am, full circle. This is my third dog now. And, you know, I caught him up on the lives of the last two dogs that I had and this new dog of mine, Gus. And I said, look, I'm just thinking of doing this. What do you think? And, you know, his mouth was proverbially open and he said, you know, wow, I'm retired, but this is an amazing idea. And I don't know why I haven't thought of it. You know, this is the missing element of dog nutrition, because where, you know, dogs are scavengers, and what they, you know, they're getting into and, you know, in the Western worlds, they're getting into frankly, all over the world, they're getting into trashes, they're scavenging on farms, they're eating everything from lizards and mice to rabbits. And so they're eating gut contents of their prey still from millions of years ago. They're eating rotten and decaying, you know, roadkill in some cases. They're eating trash that's decaying, and their guts have just evolved over millions of years to eat this food. And it's one of the necessities of a really healthy dog's life. So what we're doing today is making a very clean and refined and frankly optimized version of that, and safe.
Brilliant. So it's been a beautiful evolution. I think for many of us, it is these times when you have a crisis that happens that pushes you into something that had previously never even occurred to you. So thank you to Gus for his unfortunate experience, and obviously also your dedication to getting him to be back to his optimum health and beyond. So what were the changes you actually noticed in Gus as he regained his health?
Well, you know, like I was mentioning, the stools were the biggest. Those were a wreck. And that was super worrisome to me, because he'd always had really, you know, a bulletproof digestive system. He's on a raw food diet. It's rotated. I'm fairly refined in my feeding now. I've been doing this a long time. Everything is grass fed or organic. And he, you know, he's still young. So he doesn't get a lot of supplementation that is, you know, made in a laboratory. I reserve that for my older dogs, because you have to get into things that, you know, you can't always get 100% from nutrition. So I keep him to a fairly, you know, radically whole food diet. And that includes things like, you know, on occasion, like if he's going through some sort of illness, I'll give him mushrooms, but those are whole foods. So, you know, his digestive system was really great up until this point. And then I saw its absolute and total failing. And, you know, his stools look crazy different. So it took several weeks as I started to get better and better, this fermentation and feeding it to him. I started feeling comfortable giving him more and more of it. And, you know, I saw his, you know, when you know your dog so well, there's these slight changes that when you're on a Zoom call, somebody who doesn't know your dog doesn't quite get it. But when, you know, you look at you could see a standard and a quality of life that changes. It's, you know, there's a joy of life that increases. You can see it. You could see it in the morning, right? You could see it in the morning when they get up. You could see it in their walks. You could see it in the height of, in Gus's case, the height of his jump. You know, the alertness, and like I was saying earlier, I pay a lot of attention to the eyes and the mouth and the tongue. And, you know, I know most people look at the coat and think that that's the gold standard of their health. And it's a good standard, but really it gets into their, you know, the best vets that I know are looking at, you know, things like their, you know, their pulse and their eyes and the quality of their dental health.
All the membranes and things, because obviously the mouth is the beginning of the gut, isn't it? And right. So, you know, what's going on in the mouth. I haven't owned a dog for a long time, but I remember I was feeding a standard diet and all the things like terrible breath, bad teeth, that all come back to me now, and I'm going, oh, if only I'd known. But that was a very long time ago, like I say, over 20 odd years ago. So it is such a change, and like you say, it's very subtle. But I presume even things like his smell may well have changed. I suspect that, because I noticed that dogs that are fed on what I would call a standard diet anywhere in the world, really, with all the grains and everything else, they have what I find quite actually a pervasive smell of having not had a dog for some time, and somebody else's dog, and you go, oh. And so there is a difference, I imagine, even in subtle things like that.
Yeah, there is. And thank you for saying that. Yeah, there's you could see a difference if there's dander or not. Definitely smell them in their coat. I'm always in my dog's fur with my nose. I'm a big kisser, and I know every inch of him because my hands are all over him, and I'm wrestling with him, and I'm playing with him. His ears are, I'm kissing his cheeks, and I'm kind of up in the ear area, which is another really big telltale sign of their health. So you're actually, thank you, because you're bringing up something to me that is just very automatic, which is, having had dogs for over 20 years now that I've fed raw, you can notice these subtle changes in them, and you're like, hey, what's going on here? And I'm always the one, I'm, emailing my vet. Luckily, I have that as an option for me. I can reach out to, and I'll say, hey, something isn't right about this. Do you think I should bring him in? And typically he's telling me, just give it a week or two, don't worry about it. But I'm always, ahead of things because I'm so aware of these little nuances in their health.
Wow, brilliant. Well, they're very lucky dogs, I have to say. So the thing is that obviously this fermented thing, if Dr. Ian Billingham is so delighted with your innovation, and having been involved in the raw feeding for all these years, this is obviously a very new concept for dog owners everywhere. And I mean, here in the UK, where I am, to us, it's a completely new thing. So you really are you're sort of on the leading edge of canine nutrition with all of this. I've lost myself in the question now. So what is it about fermented foods that makes such a difference to dogs?
Yeah. So when I got back together with Ian, Dr. Billinghurst, I said, let's take this to the next level. Let's, take it from this 11 ingredient to, looking more at these as functional foods. And some foods aren't great to ferment. They're harder. And, so we looked at those, but we also looked at each individual ingredient as either providing us nutrients that we wanted to make sure were in there, or getting certain desired results, or both. So that's the definition of functional ingredients to us. Each of our ingredients provides a function and a goal. It has a goal associated with it. Now, fermentation, what it does is it does a bunch of things. It makes it, first and foremost, easier to digest. And so that has a direct relationship to the absorption in the animal. So anybody who's had a dog knows that they are wolfers. They wolf down their food or gulp their food. So I see a lot of bowls that have, chopped up big chunks of carrots and all of that. And it's not wrong. It's just not optimized because, if your dog was to go find a carrot, they would essentially do that. They'd chop it up, wolf it down, and, it would satisfy them. They'd be fed, but they wouldn't be able to get the full benefit of that whole entire carrot because their digestive system is a very highly acidic digestive system. So again, back to the scavengers that they are, they can literally eat things with E. coli and salmonella, things that you and I are very scared of getting in our diet, they can handle because they have this really highly acidic environment. That's one of the first things that Dr. Billinghurst taught me when I consulted with him. I was super freaked out. I grew up in a house where we fed kibble and we cooked the bones. In fact, a lot of times if we ever ate spare ribs, we gave the clean, after we ate them, we gave the bones to our dogs. Well, turns out that's actually the opposite of what you want to do. You want to give them raw and not cooked, because the cooked are molecularly changed. They're at a molecular level, they change and they splinter. So we want to give them raw, give them all the good benefits of the raw bone, including any marrow that might be in it, et cetera. And so back to this, this thing I learned about from Ian, which is, I was super freaked out that they'd get sick from a raw diet. And one of the first things he did was he assuaged my fears and said, look, when this hits their digestive tract, this acid, it falls into the way I remember is he explained how much acid is in the stomach, and it immediately coats the food. And it's almost like you were to throw any food into a vat of oil, hot oil, and flash fry it. Right. And so if you think about, like, say, a French fry, you get this golden toasted flash fried outcome on the end, and the inside it's cooked, but it's also untouched by the oil because the outside has created a coating, and that is what happens with dogs. They have this highly acidic environment, and let's go back to that carrot they're getting that flows through them, and sometimes you can see big pieces of carrot in your dog's stool, and so they're not getting the full the appreciation of the entire carrot. And when you look at all the vegetables, they're not getting that as well. So what we do is we macerate, we finely grind up almost into baby food, all of our ingredients before we ferment it. Now, when it's fermented, it goes through an entire metamorphosis. It's a whole process where the sugars are eaten up by the good bacteria, and the good bacteria, which we know we call probiotics, we know them to be probiotics, crowd out any pathogens and bad bacteria. And it creates this acidic environment, 4.5 on the pH, if anybody wants to Google that and nerd out on the science. Our formula is somewhere between 4 and 4.5. Usually about 4.2. And in that acidic environment, no negative bad pathogens can live. It's safer than the food you eat at a restaurant. It's much safer than the salad that you eat at a restaurant. And it's in terms of food safety. But this is all natural. So there's we throw nothing in there that's external to nature. What you see on our ingredient list is all that we have in our formulas. So this is all done through fermentation, and then it breaks down the cell walls, which is to me one of the most exciting parts about what it is we do. So all of our ingredients, their cell walls are broken down. What does that mean? So cell walls are protective mechanisms, and in digestive systems, that regulates whether that ingredient is getting, the nutrients in it are getting absorbed. And so a lot of people know, like, there's a chlorella, for example. When you buy chlorella, there's many ways to buy it, but you have to break the cell wall. It's got a really strong cell wall. But if you don't, you're not going to get any of the benefits of chlorella. So there's a water method, there's a mechanical method, there's a mechanical method, a chemical method. There's many methods that are used to break down the cell wall. Fermentation is one of those ways that you can do that. And we do that with all of the ingredients. So it's better absorption, better digestibility, which is really handy for all dogs, but especially older dogs and dogs with cancer and dogs with disease. And then it then delivers much more of the nutrients that are available in each of those ingredients. So it's an optimizer. It's one of my favorite things is and it's not to be underestimated. It's optimizing each of the ingredients, way more so than throwing them in a blender. That's how I used to give my dogs, my last two dogs there, and frankly, Gus, before this incident. I throw it into Vitamix. It would be like a very watery baby food consistency. And that was my way of breaking the cell wall. And I learned that from Dr. Billinghurst 20 something years ago. So this is a next level to that. This is much more refined and optimized.
Brilliant. So what I'm guessing from this is the fact that, as you say, it's a much more natural process. I was watching Dr. Billinghurst doing a little lecture about why dogs bury bones, and the whole reason why they go and stick it somewhere in the garden and it gets all stinky and horrible. And in our sort of sanitized world, we think, oh, that's terrible. And but you're getting the whole biome is there. I have a great interest from the human perspective of the microbiome and things. And I know that as a society, we've actually lost about 40% of our own human internal biome through the society we live in. And of course, our animals are going to be exactly the same, because although they are much closer to they're going out in nature and eating things that we think they shouldn't, they're still not actually keeping up with things if they've been having a course of antibiotics, for example, or they're not getting this species appropriate diet in a way that works for them. The whole thing about the plant side of things is that plants, as you say, have got very strong cell walls that are protecting and hanging on to those nutrients, because the plant that has uses for them that it doesn't want to give them up. And so you have to actually it's a bit of a fight. And so it's a pre-digestion process. So the animals, like the dogs, would have eaten the intestine of the animal that they're eating. So that is where that fermentation process comes in, and they're also getting all the enzymes and everything from the animal that they eat. So there is a huge there's so many levels to it, aren't there, that you are working on, that you're actually making it so much easier for your dogs to actually get the nutrients in a way that is much more natural. Because really and truthfully, a dog doesn't want to go around and eat a carrot. It wouldn't naturally go and pick out a carrot, which is a man-made plant, because we've bred them to become orange and tasty and crunchy and big, whereas a real wild carrot is actually very small, it's very tasteless, not very pleasant, and very stringy and tough. So again, it's a dog where it gulps is it might get a little bit of roughage in some of the soil from it, but it's not really actually getting any benefit from it other than moving things through. So I can see that and I'm particularly fascinated by the idea of the chlorella, because that wasn't something I was aware of, that you actually have to break it down. So we're all of us as humans, we're doing all this stuff and not benefiting from it. And the dogs, when they're drinking green pond water, they're kind of getting a bit of it, but not as much. So that's a very enlightening and insightful moment for me, to actually know how different what you're doing and creating and producing is. It's really just like Ian, my mouth is open. I'm just shocked that apart from anything, that we haven't really thought about it before.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're absolutely. I'm ready to hire you if you're available, because what you just said was perfect. There's a lot of things that you said there. So the buried bone, yes, dogs are natural fermented food eating animals, and the dirt on our dog's ball, when we throw it, that's bringing in the biome from the dirt, what we know to be soil organisms. That's bringing that into their world. That's great. Just walking on our ground, on our, on dirt, on grass, swimming in our oceans or rivers, breathing in our air. We're bringing the biome every day into our lives, both our lives and our animals' lives. So you said so many things. I want to go back to a couple. Yes, the fermentation does a lot of very, very special things, and I haven't mentioned all of them. Perhaps on the top of the list is it creates these probiotics, and we have selected functional foods. So some of the functions are their prebiotics. So what does that mean? Well, pre and pro and post are the trifecta of the microbiome, and it completes a circle for gut health. So the prebiotics feed the probiotics are the live organisms, and the postbiotics are the result of that completed circle. They're the beneficial metabolites that give they can deliver, depends on the fermentation and it depends on the ingredients, but can deliver lots of big health benefits, really big payload. So our formula completes that full trifecta. It's important to know that where most people are getting their probiotics are from synthetic biologics. And what I mean by that is those are probiotics that are created in laboratories, multiplied in very large petri dishes, in effect, and then they're stabilized so that they can be brought to market and sit on a store shelf and stay activated. If you remember back in the old days of probiotics, they always had to be refrigerated. Now they don't. So science has figured out a way to keep them shelf stable. But all of those come from usually a natural source that is then duplicated at a laboratory level. We call those synthetic biologics because that is not 100% whole food based and natural. When you ferment, that is completely natural, and it's just as natural as your dog burying his or her bone. So also, you're right. You mentioned in there that dogs are, not going to be grazing, on a carrot field on carrots. They're not grazers. But what we get to do is be really particular in selecting these functional ingredients and delivering those benefits, those vitamins, minerals, polyphenols, and all of the amazing antioxidants that a lot of them carry. We can deliver those in a formula that comes in a powder form. It feels like something that was made, for mass consumption, but it was done very small batch. We freeze dry it, and then we blend it up in essentially a large food processor, and we add a pinch of cheese in there, and it turns into a powder, and that you could sprinkle on top of your pet food. So
sounds great. I'm almost going to want some for myself.
Well, we've had customers take it and eat it and say it tastes great and they love it and it's totally safe for them. But some people give it to their cats. I mean, we specifically formulated this for dogs, not for people, not for cats, not for anybody else. But it's a whole food and safe.
Yeah, which is really something these days, because there's our food, pet foods, they're all such a minefield, really, aren't they, with all the things that we aren't aware are or are not in them. And one of my interests is to do with plants and plant nutrition, is that actually it's getting the minerals from the soil into the plants in the first place, because that's one of the issues that is very widespread about the soils where they're grown, that the nutrients actually aren't in the soil anymore. And so actually getting them into the plants and then getting them into either the animals or ourselves is also a huge challenge these days.
Yeah. Well, excuse me. One of the important factors that you're bringing up is that in our current farming practices throughout the world, we're doing such heavy tilling, and we're not rotating our crops, that we're not putting minerals back into our land. All we're doing is taking these withdrawals, pulling. And so it hasn't, there's a microbiome in the soil, and that gets replenished, and lots of organisms, lots of creatures like to live there. And if you can rotate crops, you can keep everything in balance and keep the health of the soil really great. And you're right, it all starts with the whole health of the soil. So this is a reason why we do not use anything that's hydroponically grown up in vertical gardens or anything. There's, that's a debate that we can have. I personally just don't think it's optimal in terms of nutrition. I think that, for me and for my dogs, I'd want always the food to come from the soil and really healthy soil. So one of the ways that we get around that issue is we only source from organic farms. And those are usually very, very nicely rotated. And so there's more nutrition in those vegetables than in conventional produce. We also are more and more sourcing from regenerative farms, and those are even more healthy than the organic farms, a true regenerative farm. And so our sourcing is, I'm much more in touch than I ever thought I would be in my life with farmers and what they're doing and how they're working and knowing all about their farms. And it really comes down to the health of that ingredient and the richness of that ingredient. I read somewhere, I don't know, I'm sure I'm going to muck this up, but we'd have to eat, essentially, to keep it simple, we'd have to eat something like 5 times the number of the amount of broccoli today to get the amount of nutrients that we would get, say, back in the 1950s in that broccoli. So,
yes.
Yeah. So, there was a keen, awareness of that when we formulated, and that's another really good reason that you want to get the absolute most you can from every single, stalk of what you're putting in there and from every single vegetable, and to have something that optimizes the absorption and integration of the goodness of that vegetable, like fermentation, is, probably even more important than ever before.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I can't argue with any of that. So this product that you have created, Gussy's Gut, is it something, obviously there are a lot of people who are still feeding conventional foods. It's not necessarily that easy to go to transition to a raw diet and things for various reasons. Often just from simplicity and habit and things. So is this supplement, does it work well with like kibbles and all those sort of foods? Is it?
Yeah, absolutely. We made a very clear decision at the beginning that we understand that due to people's schedule, convenience, budgets, people are feeding all types of ways. And so we are more than happy to be a part of your dog's diet at any stage, in any way that you feed your dog. The way we see this is it's a highly nutrient dense food. So we recommend a teaspoon per 20 pounds per day for your dog. So it's a lot of, that's a lot of nutrient density. And, what you're not going to get in something that's cooked, let's just talk about something that's cooked, forget kibble, is you're not going to get the enzymatic action, the live, the live superfood that you are getting in Gussy's Gut when it hits moisture, when it hits water, it reactivates because it's been freeze dried. So having something that's alive and vibrating is really important in a dog's evolutionary, species appropriate diet. I mean, I'm fully aware giving Gus raw food that comes to me in most cases frozen is not the same as him going out and catching a rabbit or a lizard, or me getting a rabbit and slaughtering it and giving it to him minutes after. I'm not willing to do that. It's just not, it's not where I'm going to go. I can almost be sure that will never happen in my life. but that would be the optimal. A fresh kill, just as natural as you can get it in the wilderness. And I know a lot of people who do it. And that is much better than what I'm feeding my dog. But what I'm feeding my dog is really good. So, so I think everybody, I do see occasionally on certain forums, whether it's Facebook or otherwise, there's this, real demonization of kibble. And all I'll say is we need to be more understanding of where people are. We don't live people's lives for them. I grew up and I had two huskies growing up that were fed pedigree and something else. And I got to tell you, I was just talking to my mom about this yesterday, where I was with my niece doing gingerbread houses for Christmas. We can't believe how well those dogs lived. They barely went to the vet. They never had any big issues that we saw. And one of them lived to 14 and a half. So, and he's a big dog. I mean, I think he was like 80 pounds. So, I can't speak to the same brand of food today and where that quality is at. I can't speak to any of that. And I'm certainly not feeding that today to my dogs. But if you want to get in more nutrition, I highly recommend you feed more fermented vegetables and foods where you can. Make it yourself, buy ours, or just do what you can to get a little bit more in there.
Yeah. With dogs these days, there seem to be sort of issues. One of the things that we've been discussing was like food intolerances, which seems to be a big story in the world. Have you sort of heard from the people who are using this product that dogs are becoming more tolerant of things that used to previously affect them?
Yeah, one of the things you brought up earlier that I forgot to get back to, so thanks for jogging my memory, is you talked about the plant's protective mechanisms and their cell wall. And, there's certainly these cell walls that are just innocuous. They're just protective, but there are also things like oxalates and
salicylates and
thank you. And what fermentation also can do is reduce that by quite a lot, like as much as 85%.
Wow.
Of those, what we call anti-nutrients. Now, I happen to think that those aren't as big a deal in a pet's diet. I think they actually might have a hormetic effect, which is a positive effect on their health. And I can tell you this from my dogs, have lived very long lives. And, I had another black lab named Buddy. He lived to 16, very healthy until the end. And I had another dog, Owen, who was a yellow lab, and he lived to 14 and a half, but he had laryngeal paralysis, and he one day aspirated some of his food. I left for the day to have some meetings. I came back and he was shivering and going into a pneumonia, and ultimately passed away from that. I couldn't save him, but he was so healthy before that. If it wasn't for that darn laryngeal paralysis, I'm convinced he would have lived to 16, 17, maybe more. And so I guess what I'm saying is, my dogs have lived really good, long lives, the way that they've lived. And that included vegetables that weren't fermented. So, they never had, kidney stones or, anything that people I think are concerned about with oxalates. And so I'm even more pleased that, Gus's vegetables are fermented these days. And I still give him non-fermented vegetables, by the way, that are blended up.
Yeah.
Stuff that isn't in, if it's not in Gussy's gut, I'll blend it up and put it in his food too.
Okay. So with this, would it be a gradual transition, or was it all So what I'm trying to ask, when you were working with Gussy, you obviously built him up over a period of time, or Gus, that you gave it. You started off with so much of the fermented food and gradually built up. How did he accept it? Was he very keen on it from the start, or?
Yeah, but he's not a good. Yes, he was very keen, but he's not a good measure. This is a dog that would eat. If I gave him a collard green raw, he'd chew it and eat it. He's had so much different food his whole life that he's game, and he's a Labrador. You know, it does help. The breed does help. And I'm sorry, I want to go back to the question you asked me that I got off on a tangent. And I forgot to ask, does this help with food intolerances? And, you know, yes, we have a lot of really crazy stories of dogs that aren't eating, had really bad gas, had really bad breath, had really bad stools, had chronic diarrhea, have tons of diseases that, you know, their poor human, you know, people, owners have just whittled their dog's diet down smaller and smaller. And there's become a very small spectrum of nutrients that this dog is getting, which is problematic. And this, you know, connection that we've had through Gussy's gut has opened their eyes to saying, well, you know, maybe I'll try it because it's fermented. And, you know, at the beginning of this, we were really worried that dogs wouldn't eat it because, again, I knew 3 people really close to me. They're all Labradors. So not a good measure. And I didn't do a ton of testing beforehand. I just felt like we're going to make this work. We'll get this figured out. And all I know is I gave this to more and more people, and I give this to that friend of mine. Her name is Sandy. She's a dog professional. And she said, I gave a sample of this to my dogs. They were following me around the house when I was holding it. And wow. So there's something natural going on. And I think also I will say that the freeze drying process does something pretty special in mellowing the flavor. If you were to give it raw, especially with the brine, it's vinegary. You know, but when you freeze dry it, there's something that mellows out that flavor quite a bit. We've heard a lot from dogs or from homes with dogs eating Gussy's gut, that it's also improved their appetite, which I didn't know was this big of a problem in the world. Dogs that aren't eating enough and keeping weight on. We seem to get a bunch of those and having them comment and leaving, you know, reviews and leaving just, you know, nice emails for our support department. So that's been really encouraging too. And I never saw that coming.
No, so you're actually still learning what it can do for dogs, I should imagine. How long has you actually been producing this product?
Yeah, so it's been a year. So it's this broadcast is December of 2022, and we started around 2021 December. Is actually November when Ian and I made the full agreement to start working together, and then we went to formulating and you know, making our first batch somewhere around January.
Wow. So this is a very new voyage and an adventure into canine nutrition then for you.
Yeah. And, you know, I think it's going to be one of those things that, you know, no matter how long we're around, we're going to discover new things. Because, you know, we're learning from our customers that call us and they say, you know, my dog has a kidney disease. Is it safe? And can we, you know, or, you know, our dog can't have this and can normally never eat, let's say, kale. Do you think you know, can, and we say, look, just give it a try. And we've given, you know, hundreds and hundreds of samples out now. I actually don't even know how many samples. And we started to realize, geez, dogs really love it. Because we were giving free samples away for a very long time, just because we were so afraid that, you know, we didn't want to send out a full package and then your dog not want to eat it, and then you have to return it. It's wasted because we'd have to, you know, throw it out or donate it. And so we started doing these free samples. We don't do free samples anymore because, you know, I think it's less than 2% of our customers don't reorder from a sample or request a return because of the taste.
Wow. That's quite an achievement in this world today, because that's one of the big issues, isn't it, with a lot of animals, is that people say, oh, they're so fussy, they won't eat this and they won't eat that. From the sound of it, it's that they're actually desperately looking for something that they're not getting, and so when this same stuff is being put out in front of them, and it's not got that excitement of, because obviously dogs particularly have got this whole world that we're completely oblivious of the incredible smells of everything that goes into their mouths, in a way that, I mean, it must be like a symphony orchestra or a most amazing painting or something along the lines of this. Because I have to say, the dog I had, she was very fond of what the foxes left behind, and for her that was the best thing in the world. And I'm sure many dog owners can relate to that one, whatever they find. And so the smell of something, so if they're all reacting to this, the fermentation, which has got that distinctive smell, to whet their appetites, that must be just such a wonderful thing for the dog itself, that it's a life-enhancing moment, really, to get that taste and the flavour that they've been longing for so long.
Yeah, that's amazing. When you say with the fox left behind, is it the kill or stool?
Stools.
Oh, stool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's something, that's something that we talk about poop a lot in our company, in our business. Unfortunately, we talk about diarrhea a lot. We have a lot of customers that, they're constantly chasing their dogs around with these wet, dry vacuums and, trying to, keep their carpets clean. And again, I never saw that coming. I didn't know there were that many households with dogs with chronic diarrhea. It's a really serious problem. Which, by the way, if you have dog with diarrhea, coconut water, big fan. But what I will say is that we talk a lot about coprophagia, which is a nice way of saying your dog will eat another animal's stool, poop. It's a really common thing. Different dogs do different things. They like cow poop, horse poop, fox poop, their own poop, the poop of their litter, their housemate, the other dog. I have seen it all, and I've seen too much, to be honest, but it's a very normal thing. And as Dr. Billinghurst says, funny enough that for most dogs, even dogs on a totally processed diet, the food that's coming out their backside is more nutritious than the food that came in their mouth, because it's gone through the entire digestive process, it becoming an enzymatically activated food. And it's also full of probiotics and prebiotics and posts. So it's interesting, very, very interesting. Well, what we're doing is we're mimicking nature. We're hopefully satisfying that itch of your dog that wants to bury the bone or eat poop, and hopefully, or even eat grass. That's another behavior that dogs do, that they naturally want to get some fermentation going in their gut. And so they're eating grass, and they want what's on the grass and also what's in the grass. So we're hopefully satisfying that itch, so they don't want to do that as much or ever.
Rob, I'm sort of aware of kind of time is moving on and things. So I think that's pretty much covered most things. I'm guessing that the product is only available in the States at the moment. Is it able to?
Yeah, at the moment, we're working. We're just around the corner from its availability in Canada, and we're also working this year coming up in 2023, bringing it to you guys in the UK.
Wow, well, that's brilliant news. And I think that a lot of the people who follow the CAM way of life, which is complementary therapies and treatments for animals, will be absolutely fascinated with this product, and also listening to you on what you've had, your journey, your adventure into this whole new world. So thank you so much for taking the time for us today to talk to CAM for Animals. And I hope perhaps we can have some more conversations in the future, because I'm sure
we'd love it. And thank you for the work that you and Cam are doing. And it was just my pleasure to be with you today and on. And if anybody has any thoughts or questions, send it to us via our chat widget or our email at gussysgut.com. And then there's a page that I'll direct your viewers to. It's just gussysgut.com/benefits. And you could see what's in the formula, what it's doing, and what we know fermented vegetables, and specifically ours, what we know them to be able to do. So
brilliant. That's really great. And I'm sure that you will have a long queue of people waiting for the news that the product is coming in our
I hope so. We'd love to bring it to you, you all in the UK, and just sign up for our newsletter, and we'll announce in our newsletter when that's, or follow us at Gussy's Gut on any of our social channels, and we'll be making that announcement when it happens. So
thanks so much to Rob Ryan for that really great interview. And I'm sure that having listened to it, many dog owners here in the UK will be absolutely dying to get their paws on this fantastic product. And we will be updating and giving out the details of when this product will be available. If you check the website, www.cam4animals.co.uk, and you'll see the latest updates from there as soon as we know anything. So will you. Thank you for watching.